Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972, and I'm very grateful to the 12 steps that led me there and have sustained me over the years. And we are in the process of climbing the 12-step ladder. My guest is Matt D. He is from All Addicts Anonymous. He's been working the program a long, long time, has a real gift for insights into what the program is about at a much deeper level. So you're coming in, I think this is episode 4. Tough to kind of join the ladder halfway up, but do the best we can. The article we're reading from is The 12-Step Ladder to God Consciousness by Tom P. Jr. Copy of it is in the show notes. And so, Matt, welcome back once again.
Glad to be back.
Good to have you.
Thank
we
you.
are the slowest ladder climbers I've ever met in my life. You know? I thought we were going to get through this thing in one episode, maybe 2, you know. Here we are at 4, and it's looking doubtful. It may take a 5th to go back to some of our older language there. Oh, but it's good stuff, really good stuff. So I'm going to read, you comment, let's get going. Being ready to use a spiritual ladder does not require that we be perfect or even very good. On the contrary, these ladders are provided expressly for people in need or trouble. What is required is that we become disabused of our precious illusions of self-sufficiency and self-merit. Step 1 goes deeper and deeper, doesn't it?
It does. Again, we were talking about how this ladder is designed for people with that, right? Self-delusion.
Yeah, and for me, you know, I'm so grateful. I had a sponsor who spent 11 years on Skid Row, my first sponsor, you know. He just got the crap pounded out of him, you know, and he was very grateful for it. He learned a lot. But he said, Bill, you will understand, you can understand the first half of step 1, that you're powerless over alcohol. You can get that 100%. But the second part, the unmanageability of your life, how much you need an outside source to guide you and help you, and because your life is unmanageable, you know? And boy, we just fight that. But the depth of it, I don't know that we ever get to the bottom.
Yeah, we mentioned this before. I had an old friend in the program, and he used to break down step 1, and he talked about the word admission, which shows up in the steps twice. And later on, when we admit, obviously in steps 4, it is to confess. But the word admission has 2 meanings. One is that, which is to confess. The other is to let in. So if you go to a movie theater, you get a ticket that says admit 1.
Right.
It means you're going to be let in. So I think, you know, there's an aspect of step 1 that you can confess, but there's another part of it where you let in.
Ooh.
You can confess you're an alcoholic. I mean, there's so much evidence, you know, but to really let it in at that level of truth, that's a different thing.
First time I've heard that. I really like that.
Yeah. Yep.
We should end this recording right now. Everybody go in a corner and meditate on that. In the case of the 12 steps, the protection mechanism takes interesting and unexpected forms. The steps are neither mysterious nor complicated, as are the ladders in many of the initiatic schools. Quite the opposite. They are couched in simple, straightforward language. Their very simplicity is a major obstacle to those who consider themselves sophisticated, well-educated, or just with it. Can be too smart for this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I was thinking a lot about what we're going to read today, and much about the difference between knowledge and understanding or wisdom, which I hope
Yes.
to talk a little bit more about as we go along. But if you get enough knowledge or feeling of knowledge connected to your own egotism, it's such a bar from understanding, learning. I think the biblical remedy for this is Christ's command to be like a little child.
Hmm.
You know, a little child is never embarrassed to ask a question. Sometimes it's almost like a little dog nipping at your heels all day long. They'll
Right.
keep asking and asking, but it's done with this kind of childlike humility, you know. We have to have certain conditions to provide us with that kind of humility when we come into this thing. And many of us are trailing in this kind of arrogance and thoughts about ourselves. We talked about false personality in
Right.
the previous episode. We're trailing in this, idea about us, how smart we are, or how good we are, or whatever. And it's a bar.
And it's always going to be with us, isn't it? It seems to be part of the human condition.
It
You
is.
think it's gone, and there it is again.
It is. I think that's one of this divine thing where we work in groups because you learn about it in yourself when you bump up against it with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in a sponsee or or somebody in the group or whatever, and if you're doing the work right, you start to see that this is a school for where there's mirrors, where there's places where you see your own faults in the other person.
Mm-hmm. Dreams do that too. They come as a correction.
Yeah.
I missed something, and it's coming back to me at night.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the dream thing, we've mentioned this too. There's so much wisdom in the Adam and Eve account, but the very first thing when they had fallen, if you take this in terms of the ladder, they were at a certain rung, right, where they could communicate with God directly,
Right.
where they were aware of His presence,
Unashamed.
They had, there are many different interpretations of what they did that was wrong and so forth. But there was some type of schism that occurred, and they had fallen off the ladder. And in the place where they were, they became identified with themselves, with the small s, the lowercase s,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that condition, you're identified with yourself as a physical body.
As an ego.
Your ego is attached to the
That's your
physical
identity.
body.
Period.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just started on that trail. I hope you can lead me back because I.
Oh, well, we got thrown out of the garden, so don't worry about it.
Yes, we did.
They even put an angel there with a sword to keep us the hell out.
Yeah. Well, in that condition, you are connected with your own ego personality in a way. There's an attachment with your own knowledge. There was a higher thing I was trying to make, which hopefully I'll develop as we go along. It'll come back to me, I hope.
Well, you fell off the ladder again.
I
Matt.
did.
That's all right. We love you anyway.
We're crawling on the ladder and we're falling off the ladder.
Isn't there a ramp somewhere?
It's called the easier, softer way.
That's it. We'll look around for it. Now, Tom Jr. had struggled with this as well, so let's get back to him. He says, on this point, I speak with feeling. In spite of my early exposure to AA wisdom, I myself developed a drinking problem in my early 20s. After resisting for some while, I admitted my trouble, got in touch with AA, and started going to meetings. In many of these, the 12 steps were discussed. I had been a serious student of spirituality for 9 years, before and right through all my bad boozing. From the age of 14 on, I had pursued a continuous, frequently intensive course of independent study of spiritual and religious matters. As an undergraduate at Yale, I concentrated heavily on religion courses. I was a tertiary in a religious order, and for a time I was a candidate for the sacred ministry. In short, I not only fancied that I knew something about spiritual matters, I really did. He was climbing a ladder, but it was perhaps an intellectual one?
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. And we've made reference to what is called the work or the fourth way system. They describe how to achieve understanding, or wisdom is the religious term. It is knowledge plus being equals wisdom or knowledge. He's talking about himself. I think he's even giving a slight little twinge of arrogance to even the way he refers to himself, I think, a little bit. And he does it again down below.
That's because we didn't go to Yale. We're jealous.
Yes. He only made it halfway through.
Well, that's all right. He can still name drop with the best of them.
They kept having problems with the electricity up in one of the rooms that the person was staying, one of the dorms or something, and they kept calling for help. And they said, there's the reference in Yale to Veritas and Lux or something. He's like, we've got plenty of truth up here, but we need some more Lux. You can have a vast amount of knowledge.
Right.
You can read lots of books.
Right.
You could spit out all kinds of details.
Right.
Right. And that may or may not be helpful to you. Usually what happens is your knowledge exceeds your being.
Yep.
So the being is your ability to do. So all of us basically know coming into this thing that it's a bad idea to destroy your life with an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we don't stop is because we don't have the ability to do anything about it. We don't have the power to do anything about it. And again, that's where this ladder comes back in.
We're not connected to that source.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you could know all kinds of things about God.
Right.
We refer to this ladder kind of in two different ways, and maybe we conflate them a little bit or whatever, but we're talking about them as steps, like steps that we do, like the fourth and fifth step or the 10th step or whatever. We're also referring to the ladder as a scale, a gradation scale where, at the top, if you will, if there is such a thing as this, he calls it the light flooded, realm of God consciousness. When it comes to knowledge, that doesn't necessarily mean that you, by learning something new, you go up a step, right? That comes from being. That comes from work on, spiritual work on yourself. I think that's the other part of this ladder that we're talking about, with levels of consciousness, right? And I think that's why you could say to yourself, why did I do this thing? I didn't want to do this thing. Why do I keep behaving this way? Or why am I always getting drunk?
I have a split mind.
Yes. Yes. And when we refer to ourselves as a scale, we kind of mentioned it as that the bottom is the basement. At the basement, you are never more a menagerie of, different little egos. 1 minute it's one thing and something it's another time. You never become more of a unity in yourself until you go up the scale, up the ladder of divine ascent, right?
And leave some of that ego. It diminishes.
Yes.
The egotism diminishes.
Yes, and instead of being, tons of little wills pulling you in 17 directions, you become more unified in that.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that a day at a time, if you continue to maintain a certain level of awakening, spiritual awakening, you're able to say no to the thing that you could never say no to before.
Yeah. Well, go back to that Adam and Eve story, the garden story. This is a homecoming. This is, I'm back in the garden. Well, someone said you can't go back in the garden. You head towards a New Jerusalem. It's a different level of consciousness. Adam and Eve were naive. I mean, in some ways, they had to leave the garden if they were ever going to get conscious. They had to leave the garden. Yeah. And many of us in 12-step recovery, we look back on our past. It's Wilson said, what? It's sometimes the only asset we have.
Yes. But the aim is to get back to paradise again, right? But
to be fit for it.
To be fit for it. And the thing that, yes.
Yeah.
If you could see the hallmark of the fall is identification, the ego identification with the physical body, and hence the covering of themselves. You also know the lower you are in the fall, if you will, is the fear you have of death And it is so great that you can't even ponder it. You can't even think of it, because it would mean annihilation and the end of all things, because your ego identity is on your physical body. And I think that's another thing that occurs in the first step, or is accompanied with the first step, the part of the admission we talked about earlier, where you really let it in. Almost nobody lets anything in until they are able to see their own immortality. Like they get squeezed that much that they're like, you become open. The ego stronghold, the magic it has on you starts to break when you realize that this thing that you consider to be yourself,
right,
it's not what you thought it was.
No.
Yeah.
And it has to die.
It does.
The goal is to die before you die.
Yeah.
That's the spiritual statement of it.
Yes. And in the Christian thing, it is, that it's to die daily, and the 12-step process is there are several deaths that occur through this process.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever person it is that comes to this thing, whatever occurs between the process of confessing that you got a problem and actually admitting it, letting it in, there's some kind of death of a person that occurs there.
Yeah. Boy, this is another cheery episode we have here, eh?
The celebration of death is birth. There's always a new life.
There you go.
If you're identified with it, it seems like it's right. That's sadness.
Right. It's the caterpillar.
When the identification is broken through the death,
right,
then it's new life, and it's joy, and it's what it's almost the physical analogy of somebody dying. You're sad, you mourn. A baby's born, and you rejoice.
Right.
Some people say we should be doing the opposite, but yeah,
we could do that. We'll do a series on that one. When AAs, many of them poorly educated, started giving me advice on the 12 steps, particularly the God steps, I could scarcely restrain my impatience and irritation. It was embarrassing to be subjected to lectures about concepts I had already mastered. It was humiliating to be asked to take seriously this kindergarten-level, sloganese version of propositions I had pursued with the great and near-great scholars of the day. I came very close to not being able to stomach it. With extreme difficulty and much discomfort, I lowered myself to the level of these house painters and fishing tackle salesmen and made the effort to take in what they were saying. What they were saying, in effect, was that I should park the fine theories for a while and do the simple things suggested in the steps in exactly the order and manner that they were written. He's a good writer.
He was a great communicator.
Yeah. Of concepts that are difficult to conceive really in depth. And that's what he's getting at here.
I think it was like the Aaron to the Moses of his father, I think he was the mouthpiece, where his father really did have a profound understanding of very deep and high things. Douly, or Tom Powers Jr., his nickname was Douly. He had this great way of being able to communicate it to the rest of us. Very appreciative he did, because we need that very often.
Right. We can identify with this.
Yes. Yeah. And you see here, we're talking about I think the first episode we mentioned about, trying to compare the 12-step ladder with something like the ladder of Moses, if you will. Right. And you're like, it sounds like we're really exaggerating things and stuff. I think from the standpoint of just, if you were to exclude the idea of being, like if you were to exclude what we were talking about with having the power to carry it out, this aspect of the spiritual that is the divine, this God consciousness, this awakening, you excluded all of that if you could from the 12-step thing. This is from that standpoint. It would be an extreme exaggeration to compare this thing to other initiatic schools, their programs, their regenerative programs. But because this thing shares with them.
There's the key word. It shares it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it shares with them that the aim of obviously is God, and in our more awakened state, we are more close to Him. Because it shares that, I don't think it's an exaggeration. When you come in eclipsed from the awareness of that, then you look at it, and it doesn't even look ordinary. It looks worse than ordinary. You know, these fishing tackle salesmen he's talking about, and these, overweight smoking individuals and whatever. You can come in very easily with that kind of intellectual arrogance and be cynical about this thing and completely miss the mark.
I had an interesting experience in my very early recovery. I was working at a treatment center in Detroit, and they had an affiliation with Guest House, which was where the clergy were sent for, I think it was a 17-week course of treatment. For the last few weeks of their treatment, they were sent down to our facility, which was kind of a skid row, bottom of the rung ladder group of people, 183 alcoholics, most homeless and really tough cases. And these guys, very well educated, had to come and participate, with these fishing tackle salesmen who lost their jobs. They didn't even have that level.
Yeah.
And some of them felt like they were home with these men.
Yeah.
And some of them were terrified by it.
Yep.
And couldn't identify, just wanted to run away. Why are you subjecting me to this?
Yes. Yep, that's the Pharisee.
That's the Pharisee. And the Pharisee is in us all.
Exactly. Yep. Tom always used to call it the, religious phony.
Yeah, and we're all religious phonies. And we're AA phonies, too.
Well, yeah, he would always say there's two types that come into the program, the religious phony and the unbeliever. Both of them suffer from a kind of intellectual arrogance.
You got
it. The one is cynically hardened at the level of heart, and has great faith in himself. And then the other also has great faith in himself. It's great faith in his religious self.
Right.
And it's got a kind of sentimentality to it that is, I hate to say it, but it feels, for many people, it feels very much easier to be around those who are down and out than it is to be around that kind of arrogance,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why the church is having such a hard time.
I think so, because it also, we talk about dogmas and all these things are all great.
Yeah.
And many of these things are at the level of knowledge, like we were talking about earlier. But this thing isn't solely about learning at that level. That's horizontal, and this thing is about vertical. This is, it's where you are in the ladder that allows you to be able to carry out what it is that horizontally,
It's kind of like Tilly. Have you read any of Tillich's stuff?
I have not.
The ground of being. Who is God? It's experiential, and you're in touch with it or you're not.
In a Christian way, it's a cross, the horizontal plane where we're at and the vertical line of where we're at psychically, and that's a cross. In the middle is the present moment.
And Jung says, we're all going to meet our cross. You can't escape it.
Yep. Back to dying daily.
Back to dying daily. Tom Jr.'s reflecting on what this condition was like. He said, I had only been talked to like that once before in my life. In the Army, when I was somehow drafted in as a private rather than a colonel. In the Army, I had not taken it in. In AA, I did. The difference was that by the time I hit AA, I was scared enough of losing my mind that I was willing to do what I was told, even if it didn't seem like such a hot idea. And the steps really did not seem promising. How could anything so plain, so trite, have much substance?
Yeah, it almost always turns on, I wish there was just a better word for it, but it really, the thing turns at the level or at the place of obedience.
Right.
You start by doing what you're told, and you may be told by an individual, or it may be something that
Right.
you start off with reading in a book or something like that. But up till that point, obedience, you think you get to exercise in freedom. We talked a lot about freedom before,
Mm-hmm.
but you think you're in a condition of freedom because you could choose if you think you can choose.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, Very often, you're not choosing hardly much.
It's the illusion of freedom.
It is the illusion of freedom.
Yeah.
Again, you put yourself under some of these, I don't want to call them rules, but you put yourself under the work of the 12 steps. You end up with much more freedom than you had before, for sure.
The new person coming in who is lost and in need of help, someone kind of taking charge of their life and telling them what is the right thing to do. It's an obligation. Before we went on the air, we were talking about Robert Johnson, and he had a situation where he studied Eastern mysticism and such. He was over in India. He was really dark and lost and in a bad way. Somehow he had just arrived in the country after a long flight. They dropped him off at probably the wrong hotel. And it was a ghetto-y kind of thing. Someone was getting murdered in the room next door. The other side, someone was having a baby. Death and life, there we go. It just bottomed him out. And he ran out into the street. The point of this story is that in Indian culture, when you get lost, you can go up to a person and say, "Will you be the image of God for me?" And culturally, it's understood that when we're in that desperate need, someone can come and take the place of God. And when they do, because the person who's down and out, he's lost sight of who he is. The other person may be in touch with who he is and who the other person is in potential, okay?
Yeah.
And there are certain rules that go along with that. I mean, very, very clear. You can't do this, you can't do that. And at some point, I'm getting to sponsorship here. At some point, you gotta, the sponsor has to let that person go free and contribute to his or her growth. I was told you need to outgrow your need for a sponsor.
Yeah.
Now, that's heresy in a lot of AA circles, but I think it's absolutely true. You need a sponsor in the beginning. You need someone who's going to tell you what to do. It's like being in the Army.
Yeah.
They don't come around and say, "Would you like to go for a 5-mile hike today?"
Yeah. Yes. Right.
They're going to kind of tell you, do this, do that. But if you're still doing that after 20 years, man, something's wrong.
And it's a corresponding thing, I think. Once you start to obey someone else, and I don't know what comes first, the thing that you're doing is at the expense of not obeying yourself.
Which is progress.
The self that's in the basement.
The self-destructive self.
Yes. Yes, very much. That's critical. It's really a thing of faith. Faith meaning, in this sense, meaning trust. Like,
yes.
You have to come in and you got to lose trust in yourself.
Right.
And it's necessary. Now, a lot of people, that from a clinical standpoint, that looks like insanity.
It's actually transference is what they call it.
Yeah, it looks...
You transfer onto the therapist father, mother-like qualities.
Yeah.
It's got to happen. It's part of the process. If it doesn't happen, the transformation isn't going to happen. But if that therapist continues to hold on to that, oh, look out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Look out.
I think the initial process does begin with where you start to waver in trust in yourself.
Yes, it's a wonderful thing when that happens.
It is. I think a lot of people, I don't know. I think it's a realization almost everybody has when they come in. They're just like, I've screwed up my life. You know, and especially when you get up to the third step, Like, God, I screwed up my life, and now I give it to you to help me
Boom.
run.
There's step 3.
Yeah.
There's step 3. I did a step 3 with a guy many years ago, a Hispanic guy, tough guy, biker kind of thing. And I said, well, have you done step 3 with another person? And he said, no, I never did that. I said, let's get on our knees and go through that motion, that experience. He said something, would you like me to read the 3rd step prayer? I said, I wish you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wish you'd just come from the heart. And he says, Lord, I've really effed up my life. Please help me.
Yep.
I said, that's the best step 3 I've ever heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And the 3rd step's really reflected in an earthly sense, in a physical sense, not in the scale of the ladder sense. Closest thing you get to it probably is something like the Army. Because the Army is something you come into and you give your will and life over to the Army. The Army tells you what to do from now on.
That's right.
Right. And that's it, period. Except the thing is, and he kind of made reference to it here, it's possible that, and this is Tebow's thing in a nutshell, it's possible to comply. It's possible to go along physically, but inwardly, at the place where the admission can occur.
Right.
It's, the big book talks about this, deep inward place where the concession is made. That you could be saying, I think, I got everything under control. I can handle this thing.
My experience here, Matt, is there's a part of me that goes back to that place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So important, I think, for people to know that, because otherwise they go the way of the priest who thinks he's got it, or the minister who thinks he's got it, and unless we see ourselves as continuously broken people in some areas of our life and come to accept that, we're on the road to being false.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too. First episode, I think the byproduct of sanity is more material in which we could make ourselves insane off of, and take ourselves. This just goes back to the center of a person where, is it me? Is it, I love the Oxford Group literature where it refers to these things, but it's like the I in the middle of sin. It's the big I, it's me. It's got translated into AA as selfish self-centeredness, egotism, self-will.
Right.
This we think is the root of our trouble. At the center of ourselves, is that what's at the helm? Is that what's running the show?
That's why guidance is I think badly misunderstood and underappreciated. That's the role of step 11, is to put myself in relationship with that higher power so that guidance can come.
Yeah. And almost the reflexive thing of the guidance is obedience that we were talking about earlier.
That's key.
Yeah.
That's key, or it's BS.
Yeah. You read somebody like George MacDonald, he's like, we all run around calling ourselves Christians or whatever, and we don't do any of it.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you say that you are if you don't do it?
And without getting political, I mean, that's the state of the nation right now. We are so far removed from that. It's an imperial Christianity that's being proffered out there. Look out.
And doing is back to the reference of being, like you can't do without being. And you get that from climbing the ladder.
Yeah. Okay. Thank God I was scared. Had I not been, I am sure I would have just ricocheted and perhaps lost forever the opportunity to learn what power is in these 12 simple instructions. In my 9 years in AA, I have seen scores of people fail to understand the program, fail to climb the ladder because they were too smart for it. I think I'm going to quit. Am I going to quit? Yeah, I'm going to quit. I talked at an AA picnic for Founders Day the other day, and it depleted my psychic energy. I don't. So I'm going to take care of myself, Matt, and be nice to me. Be nice to me.
I could use a little myself.
You could use a little. Those chickens have been a pain in the ass this week. So, get with it, guys. You're in the Army now.
Yep.
Oh, and you're the Colonel. Colonel Matt. There we go. Colonel Matt. Okay, well, listen, I just love digging into this stuff with you. I was on the phone, I was mentioned to you earlier, a guy down in Australia. We did 2 hours of yakking the other night. I mean, he's a therapist, and he's done the work. And you know what he said to me? He said, it's really lonely. There aren't that many people who are doing the work. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's true. There's some people in my life like yourself who I know you're doing the work, but I also get it even from like Tom Jr. here. I get it from books. I get it from articles.
Yeah.
I can join with people who are on the ladder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if they're no longer in the world.
You do need people.
You do.
This point was made in the Invitation to Great Experiment, but you need 3 kinds of people. You need people who are ahead of you on the ladder.
Okay.
You need people on the rung with you.
Okay.
And then those that are, not that this is generalization to say that somebody's better or worse because of where they are, but those who are behind you in that sense.
Yeah.
And you need all 3. And as you go on this thing for longer periods of time, it seems like there's less. And this, I don't mean this in an arrogant sense, but it seems like there's less people ahead of you and on the same rung with you, And although you just, thank God we have these resources. You pick up a book. Our help is always present. And then there's a lot of work that's to be done with those that are climbing up behind us,
Yeah.
A lot of work there. Hopefully that's what we're doing here,
Remember, guys, this is important. So for people who are ahead of us, I don't have to have a personal relationship with them. I can get them from books.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like Catholic or something, but the Buddhists had this thing where the relationship with I think they literally kept bones from saints, if you will, and it was you would envision like a thread between you and them to heaven. You pick up the writings of somebody like Mohandas Gandhi or something. Someone's been dead for 60, 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's a thread.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a student at that moment. You can learn directly from them, right? And their experience. Absolutely. I mean, where would we be without that resource?
Right. And we got to find, who those folks are for us, because one soul may resonate with one teacher and another with a different one.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to be open-minded to that.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Not a strong point for many of us.
Yeah, once you get started, they help you. They help you find your way. Start reading one guy, and then he sends you over to somebody else.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you outgrow some of them. That's the idea anyway. And that's what they would encourage you to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Get on to someone else who can help you. Okay, my friend, this has been wonderful as usual, but let's go enjoy the day.
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
Be nice to ourselves. And I will see you next week. And I hope you guys will come back. And I do promise we will eventually finish this little 7-page article, but one step at a time is the way we're going. So thank you for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.